Welcome back, boxing fans. So, we're currently in a renaissance of Japanese boxing. And some people will call this racist, and some people will hate on it because they're delusional fanboys. This is not criticizing or pointing fingers or hate towards anyone. It's just putting shine on something that we've never actually seen. This kind of dominance in boxing from Japan. Japan currently has 10 world champions, 10. And as you can tell by today, we're talking about the bantamweight division where they have four world champions currently. And that's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. I don't know if any time in boxing history there's ever been four world champions from Japan in one weight class. So, this is definitely a video well worth making at this time. So let's get to it. Let's talk about some of these fighters. So, here we go. So, well, let me adjust that. Obviously, I didn't adjust since we were talking about this weight, the actual division. I did have it, but it moved on me. There we go. Okay, that looks better now. So let's go back there. So, obviously, the bantamweight division was previously controlled by the monster Inui, who ended up going on to collect all the world titles by beating four world champions to become the undisputed bantamweight champion before moving up to 122 and beating the two unified champions at 122 to become a two-weight undisputed champion. And obviously, he just made his first title defense of that weight class. In the absence or the vacuum left behind, obviously you had four titles available. And it's kind of similar to what we see now at the lightweight division. Obviously, Tank Davis was elevated by the WBA. Shakur ended up fighting De Los Santos for the vacant WBC title. Lomachenko just fought Kambosos for the vacant IBF title. And Nakatani is going to be Navarrete is going to be fighting Lomachenko's Ukrainian teammate for the WBO title. So the same way the lightweight division is filling those titles, and obviously different people win those titles. I heard somebody saying that Shakur should be getting the IBF fight against Kambosos, but it's very rare that a different sanctioning body puts their title on the line for another mandatory fight. We've heard some rumblings about that potentially happening with Bud Crawford and his WBA and potentially WBO position at 154. Lomachenko obviously did that when the WBC title was vacated by Mikey Garcia. So him being a two-belt unified champion, they allowed him to fight for that vacant WBC title as well. And I think we saw AJ do something similar as well when he fought Klitschko for that WBA title. But it's not something that's usual, especially for a guy who just has one title, right? It is not a unified champion and the dominant fighter in the division. But obviously, in the meantime, since Inui has moved up, we had four Japanese world champions claim these titles. And they didn't just win vacant titles, right? Actually, they actually beat world champions to win these titles. The world champions themselves did fight for the vacant titles, but they actually beat these guys. Let's look at Junto Nakatani as an example. Currently, he is now a three-weight world champion. He beat Alexander Santiago. Santiago fought Donaire for the vacant WBC title and beat Donaire to become the WBC champion. Nakatani moved up from 115 pounds, where he was the WBO champion, to take on Santiago for that WBC title and dominate and destroyed him. It was truly a thing of beauty. Nakatani is a monster. And that's why I hope that Inui stays at 122, because there's nothing I would want more than Nakatani to go up in weight class to fight Inui the monster for undisputed. It would be, and this is just a fact, the biggest domestic fight in Japanese history. That's how huge that fight would be, right? A lot of that because of the monster and obviously how popular he is, obviously just selling out 55,000 stadiums to fight Luis Neri. But to unify or defend his titles against Nakatani, just imagine. It would be the Japanese version of Leonard versus Hearns. it would be huge. You'd have half the country behind Inui. You'd have half the country behind Nakatani. It would be a really big event. But to make this come true, you need to now have Nakatani do something significant at bantamweight. And that would be to fight Takumi Inui, the current WBA champion, who just made his second title defense of his WBA title. Obviously, he beat Jerwin and Kanjas, stopping him with a body shot. And just this weekend, he fought Sho Ishida, his #1 mandatory, and put on a clinic against him. A very impressive fight. Obviously, Sho Ishida dropped him in the first round, but then he came back, much like his brother, and dominated the rest of the fight. Was very crisp, very clean. Really is looking better now than I've ever seen him in his career. That's why I would love to see a unification fight between Nakatani and Inui. If Nakatani does to Inui what I think he would do, that would just help build up a potential grudge match, a revenge fight between the monster and Nakatani. So let's hope that this happens. It would be truly something worth paying attention to. Obviously, quite a few of American-centric boxing fans, they wouldn't be interested. These are the same people that think Inui needs to go to America to make his name, yet they don't watch fights at 122 pounds or 118. So I don't know how they think going to America is going to make Inui a star. But these are a select delusional group of boxing fans that always are trying to hate on fighters. So it's no surprise. Then we have Emmanuel Rodriguez, who actually, I was just watching that fight today, which is why I made this video. He just fought Ryusuke Nishida, who was his #1 mandatory, a fighter who was 8-0 with 1 knockout. And obviously, we know Japanese fighters, especially these lower weight divisions, are usually fast-tracked. And when I saw his record, I thought, oh, he's kind of like Ken Shiro. Ken Shiro was technically a very good fighter, but he didn't have a lot of pop initially in his career. But yet, at 108 pounds, he was dominant. Now he's a unified champion, and obviously, on the cusp of being a pound-for-pound type of fighter. I thought, okay, Nishida is probably similar to him. But Nishida showed that he's got some pop, right? Even though, obviously, similar to Ken Shiro, obviously he's young and he's just growing into his man strength. And I expect him to be a harder puncher as his career progresses and he gets away from more of an amateur style and more into a pro style. It was a very good fight with Emmanuel Rodriguez. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. Emmanuel Rodriguez was getting dominated early on, but then that second half of the fight, he definitely gave as good as he got. And it became a very back and forth fight with which, of course, Nishida edged out to become the current IBF world champion. And then we had the Jason Maloney fight, which was on the Inui undercard as well. 4 world title fights were on that card. And so, it was definitely something worth discussing and talking about. Jason Maloney was defending against upstart Japanese fighter Yoshika Takei, who I think at the time was 8-0 with 7 KOs, maybe 8 KOs. Unlike Nishida, he is not technically as refined or skilled. What he is was just a really hard puncher with real natural power. A guy coming from the kickboxing game, trying to transition into the boxing game. And you can see the way he fights. He's still very raw, but he does have some natural power, and it definitely transitioned in this Jason Maloney fight. He definitely hit Maloney with some hard punches early, and I thought it definitely put Maloney on his back foot and definitely made him hesitant to be as aggressive as he should have been, especially the fact that if he would have been, he probably would have knocked out Takei, who after about round 9 had nothing in the gas tank, and going into the 12th round was fighting on fumes and was very lucky to even survive. If Maloney would have really pushed his foot down on the gas, he probably would have stopped Takei. But for Takei, as I said, a kid that's really raw, comes in too aggressive, hasn't fought a 12-rounder before, right? Because he's been knocking out all his opponents. This is a real learning test for him. Obviously, you go 12 rounds in a grueling back and forth fight like this and you edge it out and become a world champion, you're definitely going to improve because of it. You definitely understand that you need to pick your spots, pace yourself a little better, and you better make sure that you're ready to go 12 fucking hard grinding rounds next time you step in the ring. But obviously, this group of world champions, it's very interesting. You have two really young up and comers in Nishida and Takai, two fighters with less than 10 professional fights. Then you have Inui and Nakatani, obviously on the opposite end of the spectrum. Two veteran fighters with a lot of experience. Obviously, Inui didn't win the title the first time he tried. It took him his second time around before he was able to become a world champion. For Nakatani, he's now in his third weight division and looks just as dominant at 118 as he did back at 112 pounds. He's definitely something special, and it's going to be interesting to see what he does moving forward. But, nonetheless, I mean, it's a great time to be a boxing fan of the smaller weight divisions. Obviously, back in the day, you really had Roman Gonzalez, who really was the main attraction. He was the fighter that mostly everyone paid attention to. Then, of course, Inui came around, and so you had, Inui and you had Roman Gonzalez, the two biggest and most popular small weight fighters during that period of time. But since then, because of a lot of the money that went into the lower divisions, thanks to Roman Gonzalez fighting on Golovkin cards, as well as Inui really taking over Japanese boxing. A lot more money, a lot more interest has definitely fueled the Asian market of boxing. Now, currently, when you go through the rankings, they are really representing. Obviously, at the 105-pound division, you had Yude Shigoko, who ended up just losing his world title to Melvin Jerusalem. Obviously, he's going to try to get that title back. This is another fighter who had less than 10 professional fights, stepped in with a veteran, and ended up getting beat in his first title defense. His brother, on the other hand, Jinjiro Shigeoko, he defended his title successfully, still remains a world champion. Obviously, we hope to see these fighters all fight because Oscar Collazo, the Puerto Rican fighter, is probably the best out of all of them. And then, of course, long reigning champion from Thailand, who is there as well. Then we move up to the next division. And who do we find here? As I mentioned earlier, Ken Shiro, the unified champion at 108 pounds. Obviously, last year he was supposed to fight Jonathan Gonzalez to become a 3-belt unified champion. But unfortunately, Jonathan Gonzalez blatantly ducked that fight. So now we have to see how things unfold. Maybe Taraji will be able to get a fight with Noshinga. Noshinga has shown a lot of heart, a lot of guts. So he's probably going to be far more interested in getting a good payday by going to Japan. Gonzalez, on the other hand, looks like he may just continue to duck. Then we move up to 112 pounds, and you have Shigo Yuri Akue, who just defended against Tako Kawahara on the Inui undercard and was very impressive, making his first title defense of the WBA title. You can see right there underneath, in prime position to become his mandatory, is ex-108-pound world champion Kaiguchi, a very exciting fighter. A fight between Kaiguchi and Akue is a great fight and a really, really intriguing matchup between two top Japanese boxers. We move up here, and then you get Kosei Tanaka, currently the WBO champion, and Kazuti Ioka, also another pound-for-pound quality fighter. He's going to be fighting Fernando Martinez in unification coming up soon. And hopefully the winner of that will take on Bam Rodriguez, Juan Francisco Estrada to unify titles. Kosei Tanaka, he stepped up as a 3-weight world champion, trying to become a 4-weight champion a few years ago, fighting Ioka, who currently is a 4-weight world champion. Ended up getting knocked out in that fight. And thanks to Junto Nakatani moving up to 118, that WBO title was vacated, allowing Tanaka to become a 4-weight world champion. But at this point, he's really not really been tested, not proven that he's a real champion at this weight class yet. So it'll be interesting to see who he fights next to defend his title. And then, of course, we saw the bantamweight division. And then, of course, at 122 pounds, we know that the monster Inui is the dominant fighter on the block. When we go up to 126 pounds, there's also a young up-and-coming Japanese fighter to keep your eye on, and that would be WBA number 4 ranked Hayata Tatsumi. Tatsumi, you can go check him out on YouTube, fighting in the amateurs against Otabak Kolmatov, the guy who just lost to Raymond Ford not that long ago, but showed a lot of really good technical ability against Raymond Ford, actually outboxing Raymond Ford in that fight. Raymond Ford becoming the dog and stopping him late. Hayata Tatsumi, only 5 or 6 fights right now as a pro, but he looks so professional, so polished, very skilled. It's really going to be interesting to see what he does at the 126-pound division. I have no doubt in my mind that before he gets to 10 professional fights, he is going to be a world champion at this weight class. I mean, Raymond Ford already talked about the fact that he's going to be moving up to 130 after he fights Nick Ball on that 5-on-5 card in Saudi Arabia, meaning that that title is going to be vacated, which means that a Stephen Fulton, potentially Tatsumi fight might be the fight to give him his first world championship. And I definitely think Tatsumi beats Stephen Fulton. I definitely think he beats him. I think he also beats Raymond Ford if Ford was still the champion. He's obviously, a young fighter. I think he's only 22 years of age. But when you watch him fight, you will see that he's got natural composure. Right, he was a very good amateur. His brother, a younger fighter, Rieto Tatsumi, is still currently an amateur fighter, and that kid looks great. He's very Bam Rodriguez, Lomachenko-esque in the way he fights. So 2 really good up-and-coming Japanese fighters to pay attention to as well. When we move up to 130 pounds, right now you have Masanori Rikishi, very tall, long fighter. Ranked very high by all 4 sanctioning bodies. Obviously, he is going to be getting his opportunity sometime soon. It'll be interesting to see who he faces, whether it's potentially Lamont Roach or maybe a Joe Cordina. I know Joe Cordina, people were talking in my comment section today about how he's ducking Eduardo Nunez. That may be true. We will see what the IBF does. We know historically they tend to be the ones that mandate fights more than anyone. So if they do that, then Cordina is going to be in a tough spot, either vacate or move up or take on Nunez, who's a very aggressive, hard puncher. Rikishi, unlike him, is much more of a long, technical fighter. So it'll be an interesting matchup when he does get his opportunity, depending on who he's going to step up to face. That is going to be the interesting point. Then we step up to 135 pounds. Currently, I don't think there's any really top Japanese fighter representing. There used to be Andy Hiroto, who I thought was a 135, maybe he's a 140-pound fighter, but I didn't see him in his rankings. Maybe he's just been inactive, so he's fallen out of the rankings. But he's a hard puncher, an aggressive fighter, but technically he's pretty one-dimensional. He's the kind of guy that could win if he has the right opponent. But if you put him in somebody that's skilled, then chances are he's probably going to be exposed. And then when you move up to welterweight, you end up having Jin Sasaki, who's highly ranked by several of the sanctioning bodies. A hard-punching Japanese fighter as well. He looks good, but once again, he's like Hiroko. He's a guy that really relies on power. And it's good to have power, but you can't rely on it. That has to be one of your strengths, but you got to be able to set it up. And unfortunately, when I look at Hiroko and I look at Sasaki, I think that at this point, both of them are kind of a little raw, a little rough around the edges, and definitely need to be worked a little slowly before they're put into world title fights. But you can see, Japan's representing all the way to 147, which is pretty impressive. I know people say, well, blah, 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 blah is representing. It's not a competition. I'm not trying to discredit or hate on any other group of fighters. I'm just trying to give some shine to the Japanese boxers who are currently doing what we've never seen Japanese boxers do. As I mentioned earlier in this video, there are currently 10 Japanese world champions. 10. I mean, that alone is pretty impressive. And obviously, if these fighters unify and fight one another, eventually the numbers are going to drop, because you're not going to have 10 world champions any longer unless guys in these higher weight divisions step up and actually capitalize on their opportunities. We'll see what they do. The one I'm pretty confident about is Tatsumi at 126 pounds. Above 126, I think a lot of these Japanese fighters are rugged, tough fighters that will give it as good as they got. But at the end of the day, they're probably not quite at the level to be world champions. But, they can prove me wrong. We will find out what happens. Obviously, Murata was a middleweight world champion. And, also, I think he was a silver medal or gold medal Olympian as well. So, you can have Japanese fighters go as high as middleweight and represent. So we will see what happens in the future. But obviously, the success they're having right now, it's really going to translate into future generations. Because right now, all these young kids are watching guys like Junto Nakatani and the Monster and really being motivated by their success. And these kids are hitting the gym, feeling confident that they can do well in this field, in this sport. And so somewhere down the road, it's going to be interesting to see how this translates and, what the next generation of Japanese boxer is going to be like. But leave your comments below. Let me know what you think about the current Japanese renaissance. It's pretty exciting. You got a lot of really exciting fighters. Obviously, the two best obviously have to be Inui and Junto Nakatani, but Ioka, Kenshiro are definitely right up there as world-class fighters as well. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you next time. Peace out.